Hello and welcome to our Chartered Manager Degree Information session. We're broadcasting live and Facebook, so welcome for those that have joined us today. If you've been unable to join us live, then not to worry, you will be able to catch up on repeat via our YouTube channel at Lincoln International Business School. So we'll look forward to obviously repeating the session again. So joining me today is my colleague and program leader for the CMDA, Karen Burrows, as well as two apprentices, one of whom has graduated and the other who is midway through her journey at the moment. And I'll be able to introduce them a little further into our presentation there. So I'm just going to pull up our presentation. So just bear with me. There we go. And go full screen on this. There we go. So what we're going to cover today, as you can see from the agenda, we'll go through and explain what an apprenticeship is and how it may benefit you, whether you're an employer or an employee. Now, apprenticeships are funded by employers, and they effectively would decide whether an employee is able to apply to do a higher degree apprenticeship. So if you are an employee, please discuss with your line manager or your employer if after this session you feel this is the right sort of pathway for you. In which case then we can work with both the employer and the employee to onboard you as an apprentice there. So who are we? As you can see by the various accreditations and accolades there, as a university or specifically the business school, we've got a few there to sort of shout about. But with regards to the CMDA, as I'll refer to it as we go on throughout the presentation there, we work closely with employers to be able to help inform the degree apprenticeship there and build it so that it actually relates to the workplace, benefiting the employer and employee there. We recently were awarded the Small Business Charter a couple of months ago, which was actually in recognition for the work we do to support SMEs in the region and help student startups through collaboration and connecting them to industry. So that's our latest sort of accolade to add to the list there. And these are just some of the accreditations. I sort of couldn't fit them all onto one slide here there. And ultimately, you know, the business school's vision is to produce socially responsible students ready for the 21st century. So that gives you an idea in terms of, you know, where our sort of values sit. And all of this sort of feeds into our programs, whether it's degree apprenticeships or any of the courses we deliver here at the university. Right, so what is an apprenticeship? So an apprenticeship, as you can see, is aimed at aspiring middle managers, accidental managers, people who have found themselves in sort of leadership roles there, but without the actual qualification itself. So they may have been doing some of the work, but they need to be able to sort of formalize that. And there may be and there probably will be some gaps in terms of, you know, bridging some of those knowledge elements, skills elements as well there. You must be employed throughout the duration of the apprenticeship, and with the help of the employer, the apprentice, you know, must have dedicated study time, which we'll sort of refer to sort of 20%, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on there. The apprenticeship assesses the apprentice's knowledge, skills, and behaviours, as I was just sort of referring to, and it effectively aims to plug the gaps in these areas to help meet the standards that are set out there. And practically, it's about applying your learning within the workplace there. And so, whilst I mentioned the 20%, this is effectively the other 80% where you do that. And again, it's applying the skills, the knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And again, we'll sort of touch on that, and you can do that through a variety of different ways. So just continuing in terms of what an apprenticeship is. So the CMDA, the Chartered Management Degree Apprenticeship, is split into two. We've got the standard, which is the actual apprenticeship itself. And then we've got the degree component of that as well. So it's the BA Honours, Professional Practice in Leadership and Management there. So that's the two key qualifications. Now, along with that, you also qualify with, you can gain a CMI level 5 in Leadership and Management. And, you know, the sort of quadruple bonus, if you like, here is the Chartered Manager status as well, which you can attain as well. So that's, I would say, is quite a healthy package of qualifications to sort of receive at the end of your sort of journey there. So something to sort of look forward to. Right, so just going to talk about this sort of 80-20 rule. And this is the 20% off the job and the 80% on the job there. So 20% off the job training. So this training is effectively undertaken away from the apprentice's immediate sort of work position. I say away, sometimes it can be done at the workplace, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about exactly the sort of activities you can do for your 20% there. The 80% is effectively a training plan from the employer. So it's an individual learning plan, and that's where, you know, we're looking at sort of applying those knowledge, skills, and behaviours in a practical way, and that could be done again through attending meetings or even leading meetings or sort of visiting different departments outside of your sort of your current place of work, if you like. Yeah, so and those are sort of the activities that would be recognised as training, as opposed to learning and training on the job itself there. Okay, and here's some of the activities that you can undertake as part of your 20% there. So that 1 day a week, effectively, which it may account to, so depending on the number of hours you work, 20% is normally about a day a week there, and it is part of your working week in which that will take place there. And the sort of activities that you can do could be attending, you know, lectures, seminars, workshops, you know, on campus, for example. It could be doing simulated sort of exercises and role plays. Could be attending sort of online webinars or, you know, sort of online sessions there as well. Attending conferences, whether that's, you know, internally, externally, writing up of sort of assignments, you know, catching up in terms of your portfolio work, building up your evidence for that as well. Even being sort of shadowing or being mentored by sort of experienced staff as well. And some of the other activities, so we do sort of get the apprentices on campus at various times, and those can also be accounted for as part of the 20% as well. And I think Karen will be able to go through that a bit more in terms of our sort of delivery and mode as such. And we have sort of fortnightly contact with the tutor, which can also sort of account for as 20%. I mentioned webinars, self-study, reflective study as well there. Okay. And the learning and delivery. So, okay, on this part, as you can see, when we sort of originally developed the CMDA, we did it in collaboration with employers to understand the best sort of method here, and we've sort of created a blended learning method where we have sort of 1 day, which is face-to-face induction to the program, so that's at the very beginning, and also we have sort of on-campus induction to each module. So we have 10 modules, and 1 day per module you will be, you know, attending campus to be inducted into that module itself. So that's the face-to-face elements there. We have sort of online tutorials as well, I mentioned the 10-week the modules, 10-week modules there, except the final project. We have weekly online teaching and learning through community discussions. We've got tutor support through the program leader, through the module tutor, through the portfolio tutor as well. And the great thing about the apprenticeship is sort of peer-to-peer learning through sort of mixed cohorts, through being able to rub shoulders with people from different sort of sectors, different industries, sort of help broaden your learning there as well. And then, of course, we have our online resources. So we use various sort of software systems within the universities, things like virtual learning environments like Blackboard, for example. You can even do LinkedIn learning, study skills, research methods, etc., reading, sort of more traditional methods of resources there as well as attending guest lectures, discussions, and sort of guided learning activities there. So in terms of our apprentice sort of successes that we've had in the past, we've had sort of various apprentices that, you know, for example, a local deputy CEO recruited to the role of a national CEO of a charity that was based in London as a result of their sort of apprenticeship journey. We had a branch manager promoted to commercial manager of an organization. We had a work-based project, an apprentice who did a work-based project on communication led to large savings across a number of branches within their organization. And an endpoint assessment work-based project, which focused on reviewing stakeholder involvement and feedback, which culminated in positive outcomes for all stakeholders. There's lots of sort of positives and the impact of the whole journey and the learning and the development of the apprentice, you know, is felt throughout the organization as well as for the actual individual as well. So on this point here, I'm going to introduce Karen. So Karen, I'm just going to add you to the stream. Do you want to introduce yourself, Karen, and I will remove myself and let you take over.
Thank you, Taz. Yes, so I'm Karen Burrows and I'm Programme Leader for the Chartered Manager Degree Apprenticeships here at the University of Lincoln. So this next part of our information session is me kind of giving you a little bit more information really on the journey that any potential apprentice or apprentice that is on programme takes whilst they're studying for their degree apprenticeship with us at the university. So we go through rather a robust enrolment process, and that enrolment process, it involves, as Taz has already said, an identification initially of where that apprentice needs to be and what starting point that apprentice needs to start from, because we take people on this programme that are aspiring managers, that are current managers, that are new managers, existing managers, or have come straight onto a graduate programme and an aspiring managers programme within that place of employment on that graduate scheme. So lots and lots of different starting points, which is really useful because it makes it an interesting experience to be with a different mix of people within the classroom part of the apprenticeship. But it also means our job at the university is to make sure we get that enrolment right and make sure we put you on the right level and make sure we are putting you at the right starting point of the apprenticeship journey. So you'll go through something called an initial skills scan. You'll go through something that will address where your skills lie at the moment and those development points that are important to you. And that's done from an apprentice perspective, but also from the employer perspective. So we're looking at what the employer wants to develop within their member of staff, if you like, and how we can then add value to that process throughout the whole of the apprenticeship journey. So the enrolment part really is the interview stage, the skills scan, the application pack, and that interview will take place with the employer and the apprentice together so that we can discuss the best path and the best support plans that we can put in place for that potential apprentice. So you'll then come along and you'll do an induction. One really important aspect is you really need to have your functional skills level 2 English and maths or above, or GCSE or any equivalent. Obviously, if you are an international student, then you will need to have a certificate of comparability. So that's a really important part. If you don't have those things, that doesn't mean that you can't come on the apprenticeship journey with us. You can, but there will be an opportunity then to complete that before the first year is completed, because you'll need that in order to be able to go to that endpoint assessment. You can't go to endpoint assessment without having that qualification. So a really important part of it, because it's a government initiative to ensure maths and English are standard as part of the apprenticeship programs. Once you've done enrolment, then you'll move on to induction. You'll come along, you'll meet the team, you'll join us at the University of Lincoln. It's a really nice day. You get to meet your fellow apprentices. The work placements and the work-based mentors are invited to part of that induction as well, and given all the guidance and information and training that they may or may not need in order to be able to complete the apprenticeship program with us. It is not just about the apprentice, it is from an employer perspective. So it's that tripartite model that we use. In other words, that's myself at the university and Taz and the team and the academics and the professional services team, the administrators, everybody, the workplace, the work-based mentor, the trainers, etc., and the apprentice. So we do this together. And so from an employer perspective, there is that 80% expectation of what you will do to support those apprentices on program, and then the 20% is the part that we will do at the University of Lincoln. But we will work with you to make sure that you are fully understanding the kind of things that 80% should really need to be in order to meet those standards, but also to make sure that everything that we do can be towards what you need your apprentice to be able to develop going forward. So the learning part is all around those modules, and I'll talk you through those in just a second when we get to the next slide. And we do all of that part, and that takes us around 3 years in total. So we have year 1, year 2 and year 3. And again, I'll come back to that in just a second. And then once you've gone through all of that 3 years learning, and it goes incredibly quickly, you then have the opportunity to go to Gateway, and that Gateway will open up and you start to prepare, or the apprentice will start to prepare for their final endpoint assessment. And the endpoint assessment is the part that is assessed by the Chartered Management Institute. So we have an external assessor that comes in and does that element of it. It's done in 2 parts. There's an interview and a discussion, and there's also a presentation that an apprentice will have to complete based on their final project, which is a work-based negotiated project between themselves, the employer, and then we will oversee that as well to ensure that it's going to meet those standards. If you can move the slide on, Taz, thank you. So here are the modules, and this is kind of how the program works. And the beauty of a chartered management degree apprenticeship is these modules are built around the chartered manager standards, and they can be adapted and applied to any kind of organization. So you'll often see organizations that might say, oh, well, we do a focus on public sector. It would be the same standards, but there might be, you know, this is how it would work in the public sector. And we do that anyway as part of our delivery methods, and that negotiation with the employer about what each of those modules will address within the workplace are all purely based on their place of work and their role within the workplace. So it would already be guided towards, for example, the retail sector, for example, hospitality, for example, healthcare, and public sector, private sector. So it's already built into it, because these are fairly generic standards and then it's the application part of it that makes it appropriate and bespoke to the organisation that the apprentice belongs to. So these modules have been developed, as Taz suggested, with employers, and right at the very beginning when the programme was built, and it was built around those standards, those core competencies, if you like, that are part of this type of degree apprenticeship. So all degree apprenticeships have core competencies, and those core competencies are known as those knowledge, skills and behaviours. So for example, the knowledge part of the apprenticeship is developing knowledge in a particular area. So for example, in finance, maybe you don't have enough knowledge in that area, so you need to develop that area a little bit further. And then the skills part is how can you demonstrate practical skills in that area, and that could be in the workplace in reality, or it could be through activities that we might have delivered through our off-the-job part of the apprenticeship. And then how will that translate into behaviours? So knowledge, skills and behaviours. And those behaviours are what we will then do going forward into the workplace. So how the apprentice has developed, and perhaps a better way of saying it is how they have influenced the team in which they work with the knowledge and the skills that they've learned and developed, and how has that impacted positively on that organisation, or enabled the organisation to make changes if those changes are necessary. So it's a real it's a really good apprenticeship that will enable the development of not only the apprentice who's doing the degree, but also the team in which that apprentice will influence with the knowledge and the skills that they have learned and developed. So we have 3 years, and you can see here at the top there, we have 4 modules in our first year, 4 modules in our second year, and 3 modules in our final year. And that's because that final module is a really big piece of work, so it's worth double the amount of points than the other modules. So each of those modules are worth what we call 30 cap points, credits, and they equal to 120 credits per year, as any other standard degree. So you would have to complete each year before you can progress on to the next year. So you have to have passed and completed all of those 4 modules on year 1 before you can progress onto year 2, and then before you can progress onto year 3, and then before you can progress to endpoint assessment. So there's a whole range of modules. The first module, personal effectiveness for leadership, often an overlooked module, I think, in terms of from a workplace, because this is the softer skills, you know, that time management, that setting up the apprenticeship journey and making sure that the apprentice, the learner, has an idea of what development points they need to be able to work on throughout their whole 3 years of the apprenticeship. So remember that skill scan right back at the induction. This one will link really closely with that, and they will utilize that personal development plan throughout the whole of the 3-year journey. And then they will upload that to our virtual learning environments that we use, our OneFile system. And they'll load it to the OneFile system, and that will be then explored and examined by the external assessors when it comes to the final part of the apprenticeship. So that first module is incredibly important because it sets up the apprentice on their journey going forward. So within that module, we'll also look at things such as social and emotional intelligence, different learning styles, those kind of things, to help them recognise what skills they perhaps need to develop going forward and what skills they feel quite confident in. Second module, managing and developing people, looking at HR practices, looking at employment law, looking at recruitment, selection, those kind of things, and how we would talent spot or use talent management as an organization, as an aspiring manager, as a manager in a department, in a manager, you know, within a team at the organization, and how we might then ensure we've got the right people at the right time in the right role. in order to have a positive impact on that organisation. Management of business finance, not as scary as it sounds for those of you that aren't finance fans, but it's really important if you are a manager or an aspiring manager that you have some basic understanding of budgets and, you know, how the organisation sustains itself financially and the challenges that might come up financially for that organisation, so that you can, again, use those resources within that organisation effectively and efficiently. Communications and professional practice. So this is the final module in year 1. And we have the Chartered Manager Institute who will come in, and they will also have the opportunity, or an apprentice has the opportunity, to work with the Chartered Manager Institutes and use their mentor system, which is a range of business people who are available to offer mentoring and guidance. But also they have a system called Management Direct, which has some wonderful resources within it. And during the final year project on years 1 and 2, we have something called the CMI Challenge. So in year 1, they'll be working towards the CMI Challenge, and then in year 2, they complete the CMI Challenge, and then we potentially have, you know, a successful apprentice who will win that challenge and have that credibility. And obviously, from an employer perspective, you know, you can say that your manager, your employee won the CMI Challenge, and you have, you know, lots of chartered managers working in your organization. So it's a really good marketing tool, as much as it is about ensuring the development of your workforce. In the second year, we have digital business, new technologies, incredibly important. We're using technology right now. So an important module looking at different ways that we communicate through digital forums and the importance of that within the workplace. Then we move on to global and local markets. So we're looking at the global market environment. So a little bit of marketing within there as well. As I said, the beauty of these modules is they can be applied in any way that you think is most appropriate, as long as we meet the standards. And that's our job, to steer and guide the apprentices and the workplace to make sure that it all fits together. Developing collaborative relationships, incredibly important, and the apprentice will start networking from day 1, because there will be other apprentices in the room or on subsequent years that they can network with, and therefore gain some valuable external networking right from day 1, but also how they can build those within the workplace. And then, as I said previously, that final module on year 2 is project management, professional practice, and within that we have that CMI Challenge. And all of these are work-based, and that work-based part is really important. So every single one of these modules, and I'll talk about assessment in just a second, we'll have an assessment at the end of it, and that assessment is all about what happens in the workplace. So you as an employer will be able to steer that to the way that you need it to be for that development of that employee. Third year, then we have effective leadership. So as it says on the tin, it's really about looking at leadership within the organization and what's the most effective ways for your organization. And then finally, before we get to the big project at the end, there's the organizational strategy and managing change. So looking at the strategic model of the organization and how they have to adapt and manage change depending on that wider business environment. So you can see that some of these modules will interrelate and interlink. And then we finally finish with something called the negotiated work-based project. Big piece of work, around 9,000 words in total. Don't let that put you off. Honestly, most of the apprentices tell us they haven't got enough word count by the time they get to this stage. And this is something that's negotiated with the employer, negotiated by the academic team and the apprentice. And it doesn't have to be a really big project. It can be something quite small. We have had some really large projects. We've had some big projects where they've actually built a whole new building and a new organization. And we've had some smaller ones where that project has been about reducing paper waste. So they don't have to be big in order to be able to complete the apprenticeship. It's about finding something that's appropriate, but it has to be a live work-based project. And that final project is going to be incredibly important when we get to that endpoint assessment. Next slide, please, Taz. So those assessments then. So we have what's called a portfolio approach. So as I said before, that knowledge, skills and behaviours. So each assessment to each module has 3 tasks within it. So that first task is based around discussion, which is the knowledge part generally. The second task is the skills. So that's built around practical skills and work-based examples. And the final part, we always finish with a reflection. So a reflection on the skills that have been learnt and the knowledge that's been developed and how that is going to impact on the workplace and how that's going to help the apprentice develop their knowledge, skills and behaviours further going forward. So that continuous professional development, if you like. And this is done through a variety of ways of doing it. So that theory, practice, evidence, reflection. It could be written assignments, reports, practical activities, presentations, you know, a whole range of things that we will expect the apprentice to do in order to be able to achieve those assessments. So they are all mapped to learning outcomes because we have the degree part of the apprenticeship. So we want the apprentices to be able to capitalise and be able to do the best to get a degree at the end of the apprenticeship. And then they're also linked to the standards. And we've done all that hard work for you, so you don't need to do any of that. And then the apprentice has the opportunity to be highly successful when it comes to the apprenticeship part of it. And that summative assessment then makes up the portfolio, which is then uploaded into a full portfolio of work for the full 3 years of the apprenticeship and the endpoint assessment part of the apprenticeship. So the final project is in 3 elements. First part is that business case to say, here's what I want to do, and then that agreement with the work-based mentors and with the academic team to make sure that it's the right kind of project to meet those standards and learning outcomes, and it's the right kind of project for that apprentice, but also for the employer. The second part is a full written report on that project, and then the final part is a presentation of that project. And that all equates into what we call an endpoint assessment. And the endpoint assessment is that external part. And what happens at the end of that final year of delivery and all of the academic side of things and the building of the portfolio is our apprentices then look back on their portfolio, and if they've been, you know, really on it, they will have completed everything that they need to do in advance, but they may need a few more pieces of evidence to strengthen that portfolio. And they'll take that big piece of work, that big piece of project, and they'll reduce it down into a slightly smaller report, which will then form another presentation. And that presentation is based purely on how that apprentice achieved within that project, the things that they did and what the impact was and their part that they played and their own reflections on their own leadership and management development skills. At the endpoint assessment, they'll present, they'll have some questions on that project, and then they'll have an interview which is based around on the whole of the apprenticeship, so the whole of the portfolio. Make sure that the apprentices and the employers are fully prepared for that endpoint assessment and are able to be highly successful. Once that's all done, they'll go into that endpoint assessment. It's about an hour and a half in total. It's not too onerous. I've sat in on many, but obviously it is about that apprentice demonstrating what they've learned through their knowledge, skills and behaviours on that apprenticeship. So it's a really good sort of measure of that journey, if you like, of where they've travelled. Thank you, Taz. I think I've got the next one. Oh, and then we have success. And we do have some really high success rates. We have 100% of apprentices have achieved with us. We have mostly distinctions in our endpoint assessments. We do have some merits, but they're mostly distinctions. And we have mostly first class honours degree students, but we also have a few 2-1s, but we have nothing lower than that in terms of success. So we have some really high success rates. And our apprentices then can come along. You guys as employers can also come along and attend that graduation and see how, you know, how well your apprentices have done, celebrate with them. They can celebrate with their families on that graduation. They get to come to the University of Lincoln. They go to the cathedral. It's a really lovely day. And we then offer a separate celebration event, which is based purely at our apprentices and the work-based mentors and employers. And we also invite all of the staff that were involved in that apprentices journey so that we can celebrate separately at the university. And that's a really nice day as well. And, you know, you get a free lunch. What's not to love about a free lunch? And I think I'm passing it back over to you now, Taz.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for a very a thorough sort of insight into the apprenticeship there. So hopefully that sort of provides everybody with some great information, which you know, helps them sort of form their decisions really. So we're going to move on to now. This is the bit where most people are probably waiting for, is really hear from you know, our apprentices here. So I'm just going to bring on to screen. So just bear with me 1 second. Bring on Lindsay and Vicky. So Lindsay, Vicky, Lindsay, if you start with you, if you want to sort of just introduce yourself and tell us about your role and what you do.
So yeah, hiya, I'm Lindsay. I think it's been mentioned, but I've just started my second year of the apprenticeship. I work at Lincoln Hospital, so for United Lincolnshire Hospitals. I currently, about 6 months ago, moved into the strategy team, a combination of obviously applying for jobs, but obviously like transferring the skills and knowledge learned throughout the apprenticeship. So it involves kind of looking at the strategic objectives for the trust, benchmarking against other trusts and looking at our performance and identifying areas of improvement.
Fantastic, sounds good. And Vicky, same question to you. Yeah, tell us about your role and what you do.
Hello, so I'm Vicky. I'm a library team leader at the University of Lincoln. I work evenings and weekends in our main academic library, making sure the front of house operations run smoothly, and line managing a team of customer services staff, which is made up of several part-time library officers and assistants and a bank of student workers. As the library can be one of the only buildings open at that time, we deal with a multitude of queries and situations, so it's a varied and sometimes quite unpredictable role.
Fantastic. Yeah. So both of you got sort of really sort of key jobs and absolutely essential to, you know, to your sort of respective areas and businesses there. So obviously doing the degree apprenticeship alongside that, you know, must have been sort of a balancing act as well. So Lindsay, I want to start off by saying what attracted you to the degree apprenticeship?
Okay, so I've worked at ULH for about 15 years, and throughout that time I've done a number of apprenticeships. So I started right back with MVQ level 2 and worked my way up. So I was looking to do just a level 5 apprenticeship, and we're quite fortunate to have a talent academy. So throughout conversations with them, obviously they presented me with the options of just doing the level 5 or obviously enrolling for the CMDA. So obviously doing a bit of research and looking into the course resulted in my application.
Fantastic, good stuff. Yeah, so you're quite attuned to studying whilst you're sort of working there as well. So great. And Vicky, yourself, so what attracted you to the CMDA?
So 4 years ago, I was in a position where I'd gone from working within a team as a library assistant to leading that team and line managing my teammates, which is quite tricky to adjust to. Also, working late at night and on weekends, I often felt quite isolated from the rest of the department and the wider university. And quite often I did feel like I was making things up as I went along. So the CMDA offered me the opportunity to learn some theory and best practice, which I hoped would make me a more effective line manager, make me more confident in my abilities, and hopefully increase my longer term career prospects as well.
Great, good stuff. And staying with you, Vicky, then that's good to hear. So what was the impact of the degree apprenticeship then on your sort of day-to-day work?
Yeah, so with 20% of my work time suddenly dedicated to the CMDA, which for me, because I worked part-time, was 5 hours a week. This, of course, reduced the time I had to do my job. And because I'm front of house, I'm on the service desk and out there with the students, that could be quite tricky. I had to adapt to working a bit more smartly and trying to weave the CMDA into everything I did and to my CPD. So it did become easier with time and practice. And of course, as I was learning things, I was able to make use of the knowledge I was gaining. So as you mentioned, Karen, I think there's a reason that time management's in the first module. Very good reason. So yeah, I did find myself using the skills I was learning. For example, meetings. My meetings were becoming more effective because I was sharing more information before and afterwards. And I was using the project management skills a bit later on to tackle larger challenges. So positive impacts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. That's great sort of impact of what you're doing and great application there. So, and Lindsay, yourself, so what was the sort of impact on your day-to-day work?
So similar to as Vicky mentioned, obviously time management in the first module is really good. That's one of my skills kind of going into the apprenticeship was my time management. But it's not until you're faced with, for me, losing a full day each week that really comes into effect and comes into its own. So yeah, that was kind of imperative and important lesson to learn, like the first module particularly. As I've mentioned, I've been successful in kind of growing in my career and achieving another position as a result, I would say, of evidence in my continual professional development throughout doing the apprenticeship and many aspects of kind of the skills that I learned. I'm really looking forward to the strategic module right at the end of the course, which I kind of had forgotten about because you think 3 years is a really long way away. But yeah, I know obviously Karen mentioned a lot of people dread the finance module, but I found that's been really beneficial. I say a lot of my kind of benchmarking work at the moment has a financial aspect to it as well, particularly with it being kind of public sector organisation. So yeah, that was really good. And managing and developing people, I found like the skills learnt there helped really manage my team. And I actually helped a couple of members of my team kind of progress in their careers as well. So I felt kind of really satisfied with those skills as well.
Great, good stuff. And that's a really good point that you both make actually in terms of that time management element. And it's probably something our viewers probably, really want to understand in terms of when you embark on an apprenticeship. It really is about when you're working, you've got family commitments, you've got the apprenticeship. It really is sort of, balancing all of that and being organized in that respect. That's good. And Vicky, just coming back to yourself, I mean, how did you find the sort of support from our sort of administration team or academics? How did they sort of help you along your journey?
So I'm going to say, first of all, that working in the library, I was in the best place for getting help with adjusting to academic writing and finding resources and that sort of thing. And I did certainly make good use of my colleagues in the writing development team early on. I had a bit of a wobble in my second year due to a personal challenge, and the course leader at the time and my portfolio tutor were very accessible and supportive. They absolutely understood the difficulties of balancing work and family life and how everything has to fit in, and they clearly wanted me to do well and were there to offer help and support. So I was able to make use of some extensions to deadlines, and I also had some one-to-one meetings in addition to the fortnightly tutor appointments and the appointments with my portfolio tutor. I actually had some one-to-one meetings with the course leader to help me get back on track. which did the trick.
Fantastic. And same to yourself, Lindsay. How did you sort of find the support along your journey so far? So how are you finding it, rather say?
Yeah, so it's been really great. Primarily it's communication via email, which suits me perfectly, means I can access it whenever I need to, means, I can reply to emails at 10 o'clock at night if that's when I happen to be logged on because of family life, etc. And it only ever takes kind of a day or so for somebody to get back to you. Particularly like all my tutors so far have been fantastic, like with submitting drafts or just asking a couple of quick questions. Fortunately, I've not had to ask for any extensions, touch wood, yet. But I know I'm kind of quite confident that if I was to go to somebody and request that, then it would be well received. So it's been great.
That's good, and that's a good point. In terms of the contrast of sort of the support being face to face, availability on a face to face basis, and being at the other end of an email as well from an online perspective as well. That's great. And just staying with yourself, Lindsay, in terms of what's been your sort of biggest challenge, shall we say, so far in your sort of journey?
I think it's been kind of managing expectations of my management structure, and really the need for communication in that. So communicating when I need my time to have away for that kind of like my university days, as I say, or when it's coming up to a deadline and I might need to take a couple of hours of an afternoon or a little bit more time, but being quite flexible. But one thing I would say is, obviously, to anybody thinking about undertaking this course, would be communicate with your management team. Obviously, they enroll on the course just as much as you do. They sign up to kind of the expectations of the course as well. So as long as you communicate with them, then hopefully it should be okay. And obviously we have got the support, obviously, from the university itself.
That's great, actually. Yeah. You beat me to my next question in terms of what would your advice be, actually. But no, that's great, thank you. And Vicky, what about yourself in terms of what's been sort of or what were the sort of key challenges for you for throughout your sort of 3 years plus?
So yes, it certainly does come with challenges. For me, there was a lot of stepping out of comfort zones. For example, finance was mentioned, certainly not one of my comfort zones. And strategy, something I hadn't come across a lot before. But for me, this is where my workplace mentor was able to step in and help with direction and facilitating access to information and people. So as Lindsay said, that's a really important connection to make. My mentor was also my line manager, so lots of discussions with management to help with gaining access to things and managing the time. I also found putting a portfolio of evidence together quite challenging because I have a tendency to overthink things. But as Karen mentioned, the course is designed so that the degree assignments do tick a lot of the evidence boxes. And actually, I found that my colleagues in the library were really supportive. They helped me with witness statements, with input for projects, and giving feedback as well. Lots of feedback. And my portfolio tutor helped me to select the work that I needed and to overthink it a bit less. So I got there.
Fantastic, that's great. And finally, what sort of advice would you give, having gone through the sort of whole journey and looking back? What advice would you give to somebody who's sort of considering doing the CMDA?
Okay, so for somebody considering it at the moment, I think I would say what you need to do is visualize where you expect to be in 3 years' time, when you would be coming to the end of your course, and how you would fit all of that in. Because if you can see how you would manage to manage that time towards the end, where you're putting together your big work-based project, then everything that comes before then will be a lot easier. Work backwards from the end, and of course imagine yourself walking across that graduation stage.
Absolutely, that's the incentive motivation, isn't it? Yeah, sound advice.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vicky, Lindsay, and yeah, that's been sort of really valuable in terms of your sort of experience, what you've been through, and I'm sure our sort of guest viewers will be sort of glad to sort of hear that as well. So I'm just gonna temporarily just take you back behind the scenes. So if you just bear with me, and we'll just, as we're sort of drawing to the end, I just wanted to quickly sort of run through, the requirements for the CMDA here. Now, it's all parties are sort of required to sort of sign up to sort of various agreements as per the the funding rules or the government sort of regulations there, and the commitment statement itself is a tripartite agreement there. And it's the starting point of an individual learning plan, effectively. From an apprentice's perspective, it's about sort of signing up to attend and committing to study time. From an employer's perspective, they're committing to obviously paying the apprentice, providing time off to study in the working week or during their working week. And of course, from the university or the provider perspective, it's about providing the support, the teaching, the guidance as well there. The apprenticeship agreement is also something that's a key document, and that's between the employer and the apprentice there. And effectively, that sort of helps identify the apprenticeship standard that will be sort of taken on board. It outlines the dates during which the apprenticeship will take place, and also the amount of off-the-job training to be received there. So, and as we mentioned, it's about making sure in that 20% work time of the work time on the off-the-job training is embedded as part of that apprenticeship there. And the support we mentioned and touched on in terms of work-based mentor, portfolio support tutors, all there. And the work-based mentors is an important, element to have the support within the workplace that connects to the portfolio support tutor and the apprentice themselves there as well. So yeah, very important there. So and then we're just going to move on to the eligibility and application process here. So as we sort of draw to an end, it's it's like, okay, the entry requirement. So you've got to be employed, you've got to be working in England or Wales, as that's the scheme is funded only in those particular areas. It's got to be a relevant work role, potentially, as we mentioned, leadership role, or working or aspiring to a sort of managerial sort of position. You, as Karen mentioned, you've got to have your English and Maths level 2 or equivalent, or functional skills as such there. That's got to be in place. And it's a 30-hour minimum contract, employment contract. However, if you are working less, do not let that put you off. We can sort of work with part-time students as well, with just a little bit more sort of tweaking to do in the background there, but we can work with them as well. So yeah, so as part of that sort of application process, there is a statement of intent, skill scan, which helps identify those gaps in those knowledge, skills, and behaviours. As Karen also mentioned, that there'll be an academic interview once you sort of submit your application pack, complete your skill scan as such there, and ultimately it is an employer-led apprenticeship, so the recommendation has got to come from the employer, and unfortunately there is a few documents to sort of complete and abide by in terms of funding through the ESFA there. So yeah, so a little bit of work there, but again, please do sort of get in touch with us there. So next steps really is, absolutely, get in touch with us at cmda@lincoln.ac.uk, and we are happy to send out application packs there. The submission for your application pack is the 11th of July, and interviews will take place over sort of July, August time in preparation for a October start for our new cohort there. But yeah, by all means, go back, have a chat with your line manager, your employer within your organization, make sure it's the right thing to do, and then come back. And, you know, if you've got any further questions, we'll be more than happy to address those there. So, so I think that's pretty much it. I'm just going to check if there's been any questions. At the moment, looks like there hasn't been. So just really to finally sort of wrap up and say thank you to my colleague Karen and to Lindsay and Vicky for sort of their contribution as well. And like I say, if there's any questions, please do get in touch. But otherwise, thank you, and thank you for your time.